For a long time, mysteries set at schools have been a popular thing. Did you know there's a Hercule Poirot murder mystery set at a girl's school?
There's a place you gotta go for learning all you ought to know about the facts of life. The facts of life.
Nope, not that girl's school. This girl's school. Meadowbank, England, in Agatha Christie's Cat Among the Pigeons. It was the 28th novel to feature Poirot, published in 1959. The last Poirot novel I covered didn't introduce him into the story until after the murder had been committed. The adaptation brought him in much earlier, and in so doing, in my opinion, diminished the quality of the movie. This novel doesn't bring in Poirot until the last third of the story. Let's see if having him present from beginning to end helps or hurts the adaptation. The book begins with an introduction to Meadowbank and its staff. Miss Bulstrode, the headmistress, Anne Shapland, her secretary, Miss Vansittart, the history and German teacher, Miss Chadwick, the mathematics teacher, Miss Rich, the English and geography teacher, Mademoiselle Blanche, the French teacher, Miss Springer, the gym teacher, Miss Blake, the physics and botany teacher, Miss Rowan, a junior teacher, and Miss Johnson, the matron. We also meet some of the students, including Julia Upjohn, Jennifer Sutcliffe, and Princess Shaista of the fictional Middle Eastern country Ramat. The next part of the novel jumps around both geographically and chronologically. We find out that a cache of priceless jewels was smuggled out of Ramat just before a revolution broke out. It's implied that the jewels were hidden somewhere within Jennifer's luggage, and that one of the Meadowbank teachers witnessed it. Several chapters detail the efforts of different parties to locate and collect the jewels, but none of them is successful. The British government thinks the jewels are somehow on their way to Princess Shaista, so they install an agent at Meadowbank named Adam Goodman, disguised as a gardener. As the school's first term begins, Miss Bulstrode contemplates retirement. She has trouble making up her mind who would be her successor. Among those she considers are Miss Vansittart, Miss Rich, and Miss Chadwick, with whom Miss Bulstrode founded Meadowbank. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Julia, who have become good friends, decide to swap tennis rackets. The rackets are kept in the sports pavilion, which multiple people seem suspiciously interested in. One night, two teachers see a light on in the sports pavilion and go to investigate. They hear a shot and find Miss Springer dead. The film begins with a single scene from the Revolution. Then the focus shifts entirely to Meadowbank, which I think is a very good choice, but I'll try to keep my opinions to myself until later. For now, just a summary of the differences between book and film. Poirot arrives on the scene as a guest of honor to present an award to the school. He and Miss Bulstrode have been made into old friends. Much of Miss Bulstrode's inner monologue from the book comes out in dialogue between her and Poirot. She asks him to stay and observe her staff so that he can help her make up her mind whom to name as her successor, which is great in that it gives Poirot a goal to pursue while we wait for the first body to drop. But I have to wonder, how would the parents feel about a man being asked by the principal to hang around an all-girls school? I did like one scene in particular where the teachers are chatting and revealing certain aspects of their personalities, and Poirot is sitting nearby with his back to them, eavesdropping. I feel like this is a nod to the Peter Ustinov era, where Poirot did this sort of thing all the time.
How is it you're always in the right place to hear threats and plots, Monsieur Poirot?
Put it down to a gift, if you will.
Some minor changes. Miss Blake now teaches art and ballet instead of science. Someone makes what appears to be a voodoo doll and stabs it with a needle, Temple of Doom style, and...
Just thinking about poor Uncle Bob. But there was something else. I mean, he only hinted at it, but you could tell from his smile.
A girlfriend?
Jennifer's Uncle Bob didn't have a girlfriend in the book. There are clues later on about why they added this in. All the characters who made it into the film are pretty spot on, with two exceptions. First, there's Adam, who in the film has not yet been revealed as a British agent. He's less funny than he was in the book, but admittedly also a little less creepy. How'd you like to penetrate into a girls' school? A girls' school? That will be something new. The staff is all female. I'll have to make you a gardener. A gardener? What do you fancy as a name? Adam would seem appropriate. Last name? How about Eden? I don't like the way your mind is running. The other character who's altered is Miss Springer. In the film, she's more menacing, sadistic. In the book, she was oblivious to the tension she caused, but here she revels in it. There's a scene early on when Julia's mother says something important to Miss Bulstrode, who isn't paying attention. In the film, Miss Springer overhears what was said, turning this incident into the cause that brings about the result of her death, as we'll see. Oh, and the murder weapon is changed from a gun to a javelin. In the book, the police make little headway in their investigation until Adam Goodman reveals his true identity. However, even with the information he provides, no one can figure out why the crime took place in the sports pavilion. A mysterious stranger cons Jennifer out of her tennis racket, except, as Julia points out, it was really Julia's racket, since they'd swapped. Miss Bulstrode tries not to let publicity over the murder hurt the school's reputation, but then Princess Shaista is spirited away by someone impersonating a hired driver. On top of the kidnapping, another light is seen in the sports pavilion in the middle of the night, and this time it's Miss Vansittart who's found dead, bludgeoned with a sandbag. Julia Upjohn starts putting it all together, and she discovers the Ramat jewels hidden inside the handle of her tennis racket. Apparently the murderer has also figured this out, as someone attempts to sneak into Julia's room that night. Julia decides she needs the help of a private detective, and finally, Poirot enters the story. Poirot and the police investigators agree that out of all the school staff, the most likely culprit is Mademoiselle Blanche, and they're actually not far off, for this is not the real Angèle Blanche, the schoolteacher. This imposter is using her dead sister's credentials, but she's not the killer, as we discover when she blackmails the killer, and is killed. In the film, it's left unclear whether Miss Springer was killed because of the jewels or for some personal motive. This allows for a wider field of suspects, as the guilty party no longer has to be someone who was in Ramat at the time the jewels were hidden in the tennis racket. With Poirot already on site, some plot threads reach fruition sooner rather than later. For example, in the book, On a Hunch, Poirot asks if anyone noticed the knees of Princess Shaista before she disappeared. Later he explains that knees can function as an indicator of age. In this case, they would have shown that Shaista was an impostor who was much older than 15, and the real princess was kidnapped beforehand. In the film, he checks her knees himself, confirming his hunch and enabling him to help the police find her. There are a few minor alterations, such as the murderer forcing the lock on the sports pavilion, Miss Blake having some of Miss Rowan's lines, and the girls being allowed in each other's rooms. Julia finds the jewels as a result of someone trying to break into her room, another coincidence replaced by cause and effect. But the biggest changes occur at about the midpoint. In the book, Anne Chaplin's alibi for Miss Vansittart's murder is that she's on a date with her sort-of boyfriend, Dennis. In the film, they consolidate characters by having her date Adam instead, and together they find Miss Chadwick screaming over the second body. As Miss Vansittart is left out of the film, the second victim is changed to Miss Rich, except she doesn't die. She opens up to Poirot about why she was absent the previous term. She'd become pregnant and lost the baby. What Mrs. Upjohn said to Miss Bulstrode on the first day of term, and in the film was overheard by Miss Springer, was that she'd recognized a former espionage agent who was thought dead. When Mrs. Upjohn is finally located and brought back to Meadowbank, she identifies that person as Anne Shapland. That's right, the killer was not one of the visiting teachers in Ramat. It was a woman who had been mentioned briefly, whom we'd been led to believe was unimportant. She got a job at Meadowbank because of what she'd seen. There were other clues in the book pointing to Anne that were left out of the film, such as her protesting the closing of the school, because it would diminish her chances of finding the jewels, and her conspicuous absence from her desk at the time that someone conned the tennis racket off Jennifer. Anne pulls out a pistol and shoots at Miss Bulstrode, but Miss Chadwick takes the bullet, sacrificing herself. On her deathbed, she confesses it was she who murdered Miss Vansittart, out of jealousy. Miss Chadwick thought that she should be the one to succeed Miss Bulstrode. In the end, Miss Bulstrode chooses Miss Rich, in spite of her love affair. At the end of the book, the jewels are passed on to the Ramat prince's secret wife and child in London, rounding out the arc of a character named Mr. Robinson, who appears in a few late Agatha Christie novels. Mr. Robinson is said to be one of the arrangers behind the scenes, echoing a concept from the novel The Big Four. It's probably for the best that it's left out. The film sticks pretty closely to the book, though with the subplots already having been paid off, there's not a lot for Poirot to clarify at the denouement. Since the international scenes from the book were left out, Poirot strings together clues about the killer that have popped up throughout the film. Anne's proximity to Bob is explained by having her become his girlfriend in order to get close to the prince, to destabilize his regime. The name Angel has come up several times and turns out to be Anne's code name. In the book, the name Angel was mentioned once as a clue, but the film makes better use of it. The film leaves out the secret wife and child, but ends with Julia receiving one of the jewels, just as she did in the book. I've wondered how it would be if someone did a film adaptation of this story where Julia was made the protagonist, with Poirot left out altogether. A lot would have to be changed, but it could work. However, I think in this case, Poirot's increased presence did nothing but benefit this story. He keeps the pace moving steadily, the perspective is more focused, and, well, it feels more like a detective story. It's always much more fun to see a detective be part of an ongoing mystery than having them be brought up to speed near the end. Also, the screenwriter has reshaped the plot such that instead of occurring spontaneously, all the core events are brought about or motivated by things that come before. This is one of my favorite Poirot books, but the film overall is a definite improvement. Mark Gatiss, you've done it again. Well, that's 3 Poirot stories in a row that I've covered. Next time we'll try a different detective. Or 2. Thanks for watching.